Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. It's 2025, and Chuck Norris is still doing amazing things at 85 years old. It looks like for this action movie star, getting older is just a number and fans are loving it. Whether he is just sharing a picture of him and his family on vacation, or doing a small part in a movie, Chuck has kept sharing what's happening with his fans. Yes, his life now looks very different from the action movies that made him famous, but he has built a very happy life for himself away from Hollywood. With money worth tens of millions of dollars, including a ranch that has its own water bottle factory and a car collection that would make even rich people jealous, Chuck has been busy, still full of surprises. And let's check out what is new with the greatest action star alive. Before he was famous and rich, all Chuck knew in life was how to fight to stay alive each day. Born in 1940 as Carlos Ray Norris, he was the newest member of a tiny town in Oklahoma called Ryan, where fewer than thousands people lived. The Norris family was very poor, so poor that their small house had no indoor bathroom or electricity. Winters were so cold that the family had to sleep in their clothes. During one winter, the family was so poor they ate nothing but beans and cornbread for 47 days straight. As if living in such a tough place wasn't hard enough already, Chuck was born with a serious sickness called jaundice, and the doctors thought he might not live because he only weighed about 5 pounds when he was born. But a fighter from the very beginning, Chuck lived. Even his mother believed he had a reason for staying alive. Not that anyone in that freezing house could have guessed what that reason would be. Chuck's father, Ray Norris himself, had lived a pretty hard life. When he was 17, he lied about his age to join the army. He fought in the Second World War and even lived through a deadly explosion during the Battle of the Bulge. But after coming home, the scary memories never left him. This pushed him into drinking too much alcohol. By the time young Chuck was 9 years old, Ray was drinking 2 bottles of whiskey every day. On one Christmas Eve in the early 1950s, he was so drunk he crashed the family's only car into a pole. Over the next 12 years, Ray jumped from one job to another, more than 20 in total. He worked as Apperson, who fixes cars, a bus driver and a truck driver. He drove across almost every state in America and covered hundreds of thousands of miles, but he still never made much money. He often worked 14-hour days and sometimes had 3 jobs at once. To help the family, his wife worked as a waitress, making $35 a week. Ray's drinking problem didn't look like it was going to help the family get out of being poor. And this, along with other problems, caused Chuck's parents to get divorced. At this time, Chuck was 12 years old and had already started helping out. He helped with money by taking on any job he could. Whether it was delivering newspapers, shining shoes, or working in the fields, Chuck would do it. When he got a job at a grocery store where he made $12 a week, the young boy had to walk almost 8 miles every day to work. After his parents got divorced, Chuck turned 13, but his father did not come and instead mailed him a wrinkled $5 bill. As a teenager, Chuck kept that bill for many years to remind him of what he never wanted to become. In school, he was very quiet. Teachers said he could go a whole day without talking. He was very scared to speak in front of people and once threw up before giving a book report in 7th grade. He refused to try again and took a failing grade. He also stuttered so badly that he avoided certain letters when he talked. When he was 15, he was only 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighed less than 100 pounds. Police officers often picked on him. One even pushed him into a mud puddle in front of the girl he liked. He was so shy that he ate lunch alone in the boiler room. In his last year of high school, the class photographer asked him to step aside, not knowing he was actually a student. Chuck would later say that he was almost invisible during his high school years. However, things began to change when his family moved to Torrance, California. That year, his mother finally left his father for good. The new life in a new city wasn't any easier. The family lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment with very little money. Chuck kept working part-time jobs to help support his family. Unfortunately, he was still struggling in school. He failed his first public speaking class and never joined sports or clubs. But Chuck would later say that something amazing happened in high school. It was at one of the school's Christmas dances that he met his first wife, Diane Holchek. Chuck was 16, and Diane was a cheerleader. Somehow, he found the courage to ask her to dance. That single dance turned into a long relationship. They dated for 2 years, and Chuck asked her to marry him because he was scared she might leave him for someone who had more money. They got married just after his 18th birthday. The wedding was small with only 23 people. Their rings were borrowed and their honeymoon was just one night in a cheap hotel. At that time, Chuck had already joined the Air Force, and 8 days after the wedding, he left for duty. He joined the military because he felt trapped, especially after his drunk father caused a big scene at his graduation. With only $300 to his name and a new wife to support, the pressure was a lot, and this made Chuck fail his first military test. Luckily, for him, during a time when they needed people, he was accepted as an air policeman because it was one of the few jobs available for new people without special training. He failed the fitness test twice and got into trouble twice in his first 6 months. For someone who would go on to be a world-famous action star, Chuck had never fought anyone before joining the Air Force. In fact, in his first fight training, Asmala opponent beat him in just 12 seconds. But that was all going to change soon. And it all started with the name. In the late 1950s, Chuck was sent to South Korea, where the local people had trouble saying his real name, Carlos, and they began calling him something that sounded like Chuckles. His commander heard this and made it shorter to Chuck. That was the first time the name stuck. Chuck even asked if he could keep his real name on official papers, but they said no. The officers said nicknames helped people feel better. One night while feeling lost, Chuck walked into a judo school. A smaller teacher beat him badly, but something inside him clicked. He came back the next day and began training seriously in martial arts under a Korean teacher named Kim Bachman. This teacher only called him Chuck, which meant strong fist. The martial artist studied in South Korea was Tang Suo. By the early 1960s, his time in the military was over, and he came back to California with a black belt and a dream. After coming back to the US, he learned from teachers of Shotokan, Chetoryu, American Kempo, and Judo. He put together parts of each to make his own style, which became American Tangsudo. For work, he applied to become a police officer. But while waiting for an answer, he opened his first martial arts school. During the day, he worked at Northrop Aviation, and at night, he taught karate. Within 2 years, he had enough students to quit his day job. It was a bold move because few Americans had even heard of his style of martial arts, which was the less-known Tang Suo. This bold move would soon pay off, and Chuck soon built a chain of karate schools across Southern California, eventually more than 30. Famous people like Steve McQueen, Bob Barker, and even Priscilla Presley became his students. With a growing family, Chuck knew he needed to make more money. That was when he turned to tournaments. At first, things did not go well. He lost matches to Joe Louis and to Alan Stein at the International Karate Championships. He was beaten 3 times by Tony Tullisand, knocked out early by John Camozzi in another event. But instead of giving up, these losses made him more determined. Back in the tournament world, everything began to change. In the late 1960s, Chuck started winning. He beat top fighters like Joe Louis, Skipper Mullins, and Steve Sanders. At one event, he even used a judo throw to beat a much older opponent, showing that he was adding new moves to his skills. He fought Joe Louis again, but this time he used movement and counters instead of standing still. By the end of that year, he had beaten Joe Louis 3 times without losing once. Chuck was no longer just a teacher. He was becoming a true champion. In early June of 1967, Chuck entered a karate tournament where he fought and beat 7 opponents in one day. His final match was against Skipper Mullins. Only a few weeks later, he traveled to New York and won another big victory at Madison Square Garden, beating Steve Sanders. It was here that Chuck met Bruce Lee after winning the All-American Karate Open. Bruce had been there giving a demonstration, Their conversation turned into a friendship and later a respectful rivalry. For the next 2 years, they trained together in Los Angeles, and even Bruce Lee would later say Chuck helped him get better at his kicking moves. In the beginning of 1968, Chuck fought a young fighter named Luis Delgado, who gave him his 10th and final career loss. Later that same year, they had another fight. Chuck knocked Delgado down in the first round, but Delgado came back with a kick that split Chuck's mouth. Even so, Chuck scored more points and won. Some people even said Delgado may have broken his arm during the fight. That night, Chuck became the professional middleweight karate champion. In April of 1968, Chuck defended his All-American Karate Championship at the Tournament of Champions. It was a difficult round-robin format, but he still came out on top. That same year, he also won the International Karate Championships again and the National Tournament of Champions. On January 17th of 1970, he defended his title one last time before stopping professional fighting in 1974. By the time he stopped fighting, Chuck had never lost a professional middleweight fight. He had completely changed the way karate was seen in America. In 1973, he created the National Tang Soo Do Congress. By 1979, he wanted something bigger. So he started the United Fighting Arts Federation, where he introduced Chun Kuk, demeaning the universal way. This system put together strong fighting moves with values of self-discipline, respect, and personal growth. In 2015, it was officially renamed the Chuck Norris system. With his growing fame, many people wanted to learn from him, including famous people. His karate schools produced more than 300 black belts. Chuck even coached a black belt team that stayed undefeated for 29 tournaments in a row. His influence as a teacher became just as important as his record as a fighter. Steve McQueen, one of his most famous students, told Chuck to try acting when money was tight. Still, Chuck did not just walk into Hollywood, he had to fight his way in. In the late 1960s, while he was still working at Northrop Corporation to pay the bills and running a few karate schools on the side, he had made a small appearance in The Wrecking Crew, a spy comedy starring Dean Martin. Chuck's role in The Wrecking Crew was small, but it was the beginning of something big, because in the early 1970s, Bruce Lee himself called Chuck. Bruce needed an aerial fighter to play the bad guy in The Way of the Dragon, and Chuck said yes. The movie broke records in Hong Kong, making millions and pulled in well over 100 million worldwide. Their final fight scene became one of the most famous battles in movie history. It was not just acting, it was real skill, real moves, and real respect. What the audience saw was two actual martial arts masters on screen. That 10-minute battle became a classic. Chuck later called it the best martial arts scene ever filmed, and it is hard to argue with him. Chuck had gone from being a stuntman to a star. Still, he did not want to live in Bruce Lee's shadow. He wanted his own path, and someone pretty big was already available to help him clear it. Steve McQueen was Chuck's most famous karate student and had already pushed his teacher to try acting. Now, he believed Chuck had more to offer than just fight scenes. McQueen told Chuck to take acting classes at MGM. Chuck listened because he wanted roles with real stories. That change in thinking led him to a small film called Breaker Breaker in 1977. Most actors would have passed on it because it had a low budget and an unknown director, but Chuck wanted a leading role that showed more than just fists. The film surprised everyone. It made enough money to prove that Chuck was not just a sidekick anymore. He could carry a movie. 1 year later, he starred in Good Guys Wear Black. The film did not open with a bang. It was released on only 5 screens in Denver on June 2, 1978. Movie companies did not want to touch it, so the producers tried something bold. They rented theaters themselves, paid flat fees, and kept every dollar from ticket sales. Chuck pushed it even further. He went on a massive publicity tour, giving over 2,000 interviews in a single year. He worked so hard that he landed in the hospital with a sore throat. But that incredible effort paid off. The film made more than $18 million on just a $1 million budget. Even though critics said his acting was bad, the public did not care. They saw something new. A tough American martial artist on the big screen, different from the kung fu movies from Hong Kong. Chuck told reporters his character, John T. Booker, was sensitive but deadly if pushed. He wanted to be like Clint Eastwood. And that dream did not feel so far away when McQueen, his mentor, told him, "Let Theco stars talk, you focus on presence." That advice shaped his career. After that hit, Chuck did not slow down. In 1979, a force of one-hit theaters. It had a modest budget of about $3 million but made up to $23 million. He played a karate champion helping police hunt criminals and audiences loved it. Then he starred in The Octagon and In an Eye for an Eye. The big studio had no choice but to notice. Columbia Pictures gave Chuck a chance with Silent Rage, which was filmed in only 30 days and made over $10 million. That same year, MGM sent Chuck to Hong Kong to star in Forced Vengeance, which made millions. Then came Lone Wolf McQuade in 1983. Orion Pictures backed the movie and fans loved it. At that point, Chuck was no longer just a martial artist. He was a full action star. The best was yet to come. In 1984, Chuck signed a major deal with Cannon Films. His first project, Missing in Action, changed everything. Chuck dedicated the movie to his brother, who had died in Vietnam. The movie ended up doing so well that they made sequels. This was when Chuck turned to TV shows. After he had said no to doing it for a while, he had finally found the right show, Walker, Texas Ranger. As Cordell Walker, Chuck didn't have to get inspiration from far away. The character was a lot like himself, part Cherokee, part Irish, a Vietnam veteran, and a martial artist. The show itself was filmed only a couple of hours from Chuck's home in Texas. Walker, Texas Ranger delivered great stories, much-needed moral lessons, and plenty of roundhouse kicks. The show eventually lasted 9 seasons with more than 200 episodes. Chuck was more famous than ever, but his personal life was not perfect. In the late 1980s, his first marriage ended after almost 30 years, partly because he had had an affair that had led to the birth of his daughter Dinah. Still, Chuck didn't give up on love, and in the late 1990s, at 58 years old, he met Gina O'Kelly during a dinner. The very next day, she was on the set of Walker, Texas Ranger, and soon they began dating. In the early 2000s, when Chuck was 61, they got married. Not long after, they were surprised to learn they were expecting twins. At first, the doctor thought there was only one baby, but then said there were 2. Chuck almost fainted from the shock, but both children were born healthy, and Chuck decided to step back from making movies to raise them. You would expect Chuck Norris's name to be forgotten as the 2010s and 2020s came around, right? It didn't, because the age of social media decided to honor the one and only Chuck Norris with memes of his stuffness as a fighter flooding the internet. By the middle of the 2020s, Chuck's net worth was said to be around $70 million. That number surprised fans, but Chuck had made very smart real estate choices, in addition to other steady investments and years of behind-the-scenes earnings. He was also a best-selling author. He wrote about everything from martial arts to politics. Books like Black Belt Patriotism and The Justice Riders sold well and added to his income. He also turned his image into a business. He launched 2 brands, Seaforce Premium Water and Lone Wolf Ranch Pets. The water brand came directly from his ranch in Texas. The pet food company was created with his wife Gina and inspired by their dogs. Then there is Lone Wolf Ranch in Navasota, Texas. It is not just his home. It is also where Seaforce water is bottled. The ranch has a massive bottling plant, a martial arts training hall, and even a private lake. The property covers tens of thousands of acres and is designed to be self-sufficient, just like the man himself. Chuck Norris fought for life when he was born, and the man kept fighting until he got everything he wanted. Now, he is fighting aging, and knowing him, he would probably win again.